Everyone. Should we just start recording now?
Sorry, I just did.
Okay, awesome. So thank you for tonight for coming to our lesson about finding fulfillment in God. And no, we haven't met in last week. We had midweek congregational, and so we did. What do you call that? Where we got the people's opinions. Survey, that's right. We had a survey, and quite a few people suggested that maybe we can talk about alcohol and other substances like weed and things like that. And I understand in light of the pandemic, people can find comfort in those things, can find comfort in turning into alcohol, or even in like struggling with the other substances, and especially experiencing isolation or whatever. However you're coping with things, it doesn't even have to be pandemic, but anything in life. And we thought it would be a good topic to also address, why we should turn to God, find fulfillment in God, rather than find comfort in these other things. And now, me being Albanian, I love alcohol, okay? And that's something that I have to be mindful that it's like, where do you cross the line of I'm just drinking, because of I'm out with my friends for fun and it's okay? And then when does it become like, all right, every time I'm feeling some type of stress, I'm going to alcohol, right? So where does it become like that comfort for you? And so I felt like this kind of out of my league, and Lori and Heather kind of agreed. So we were like, we got to bring an expert in, someone who someone who really has, just a unique perspective. And the first person that I thought of was Ben Roundtree, and just kind of introduce him a little bit. I've known Ben for over 12 years now, Ben, 11 years. And we met I stayed with his family 11 years ago at Southern Connecticut Church of Christ, and we served in an internship there with the campus ministry. And it was life-changing. The Roundtree family became like a spiritual family to me, and I love Ben. I love his perspective. He's currently part of the New York City Church of Christ, and he's a great disciple, great brother. I love him to death. He's a great photographer, very talented. And but yeah, the reason why I asked him, I feel like as he's gonna share, he has a very unique perspective on this topic. And without kind of taking more of his time, I just wanted to kind of open it up with a prayer, and then I'll let Ben take it away from there, all right? So please pray with me. Father God, thank you for tonight, and I pray that as we look at your word and as we hear Ben speak, God, I pray that you can inspire us, that you can be our only source of comfort, our only source of fulfillment, God. And I pray for all the disciples here that will leave inspired and resolve, God, to really cling to you. Just like a branch clings to the tree, God, that it takes all the energy from the roots. I pray that that's how we view you, God, that we get our nourishment, get our fulfillment in you, God, and not from exterior things, not from what this world has to offer, not what makes us feel good, God. But I pray that you can speak through Ben, and that the message really impacts our hearts, and we love you and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So Ben, it's all yours, man.
All right. Thanks so much, Tika. I appreciate the intro, and I'm really grateful for you and Heather calling me and just your friendship over the years. So it's really great to be here, and happy to see you guys. Grateful to meet everyone else. Just to recap, my name is Ben Roundtree from New York City. I've been here about 10 years now, which is really cool. And a filmmaker working here and photographer, like Tika mentioned. And I am definitely really passionate about this topic. I've been a part of the chemical recovery ministry here in New York, which is basically a ministry dedicated to helping people recover from alcoholism and drug abuse, and also tackles the spiritual elements of having a relationship with God and navigating that. So this is definitely my background. I understand that most people here probably aren't in that genre of everything, but I definitely would love to share my story, share what I'm coming from, and then share a bit about my perspective on how I see finding contentment in God from that view. So yeah, thanks so much, guys, for listening to me. And I hope something's helpful. But just know that this is definitely a topic I care about a lot. And after this, if anyone else wants to talk individually or just continue the conversation, I'm definitely happy to do that as well. So I'll start by sharing my story. And first, I'm really grateful I got to do this because, it's been 10 years I've been a disciple. And I think when that time goes by, it's really easy to forget where you come from and forget how much God does in all of your lives and all of us. And it's really easy to forget, oh man, I was like in the muck and in the mire, like deep. And, 10 years ago. And so it was helpful for me to kind of go back and remember my roots and how much, God saved me from, and, how he saves everybody. But basically it all started, when I was 10 or 11 years old. My parents became Christians and a part of the church in Connecticut. And it's cool because I saw a huge transformation in my parents' life. My dad, I remember, would go spend time with this homeless guy when I would play hockey every week. And I just remember like he didn't do that before, and seeing changes like that and building a relationship with this homeless guy named Frank, and my mom too. And that was just really appealing to me. I loved the church growing up. I loved my friends in the church. I think I was always interested in spiritual concepts. And I remember as a kid, just like asking my mom, like, how long does it take to get to heaven? Do people like float up, and like, does it take a few years? Like, when does that happen? And just interested in like an afterlife and God and who he was. But at the same time, as a kid, I was also very impulsive and a little bit wild and had a lot of energy, and just didn't have like, I had a little bit of an edge. I wasn't really scared to do things. I was a little bit of a daredevil. And when I was older in high school, was just sparked an interest with experimenting with alcohol and drug abuse. So pretty much, I'm just going to be really honest with you guys and share my story in kind of my life for 5 years that went really strong. But basically what's crazy is, the first time I got drunk was also the first time I got arrested. So I look back and I'm like, man, that like definitely was a clear warning. Like that doesn't happen very often. But I was 14 years old. I went to a friend's house with 2 other people. We all got really drunk, and I just remember like really loving the experience and felt like I was more confident and fun and friendly. And then the next day, the police show up at my house, and I ended up getting arrested and was on probation for a year, and had to kind of go to high school as a freshman with this reputation. And I think despite that, I was still interested to party. And for me, it was kind of this escape of reality. And I felt like I was better socially and more fun and all these things that I felt like alcohol would provide for me. But in reality, it just really came crashing and really got deep and dark really fast. And my dad, would tell me, would really warn me that, alcoholism runs in our family. I have a lot of family members that struggled with alcoholism. My grandmother pretty much like drank herself to death, and both of my uncles were alcoholic. And so my dad was always having this conversation with me and my sister about alcohol and about just our family history and how susceptible we are to it. But despite that, I really just wanted to figure it out on my own. And I think I was really just focused on kind of the pursuit of happiness and like what's going to make me feel good and be fun, and kind of living life on the edge, people say, was definitely my personality type. But at the same time, so through this period in high school, when I'm kind of living this rowdy life, I'm also going to youth group. I'm also a part of the church. And at the same time, I'm kind of in this tug of war with the spiritual battle, because I'm very also interested in God and the Bible and love the community there. And, was just kind of in this in between. But most of the time in school and with my friends, it was just hard to give that up at the time. And I knew what it was to be a disciple. So I knew how difficult it would be, and I knew what the terms were and what the convictions were. And so, it was hard to give that up at the time. And so my drinking went very consistent, and I was smoking marijuana before class in school. I was going to CVS and I was stealing Robitussin cough syrup and using weekly, and then later on got into drugs like cocaine. And at the time I was drinking and driving And I remember specifically one time when I was driving home drunk and it was snowing and raining, and I really like couldn't see the road at all. It was so blurry. And I literally remember just like crying out to God, praying, God, get me home safe, because like I can't see the road. It's snowing. I could swerve. Like it would be so easy to just die right now. And I don't want to go like this. And I remember like God got me home that night. And I was crawling to my room and like threw up, and my mom had to like the next morning clean everything up. And that was like just um, a very frequent thing that was happening in my life. And so I think I might went to rehab twice in that period. But eventually, what really happened and changed was when I was 17 years old. It's really changed my life. So I was using cocaine. I was bringing it to some friends in school. One of my friend's parents saw the text message that I was bringing cocaine to school, got the principal involved, and they called me into office, checked my bag, found the cocaine, and I got arrested that day and spent the night in jail. What was crazy though is that, I was 17 years old. It was 3 days before my 18th birthday. And so if I was 18, I would have had a permanent record, probably would have gone to jail for 2 years. It would have been a lot more difficult, but I was 17. So I was able to try as a youthful offender, was able to not have a permanent record. But also that morning, a brother from the church in Connecticut called me that morning and pretty much told me like, Ben, I know the life you're living, it's going to come crashing at some point. I had a dream about you last night that you were getting arrested, and I just care about you and don't want you to go down that road. He called me that morning and told me this thing, and I like just passed it off like it was nothing. And then eventually started studying the Bible with him later on. But at that point when I got arrested, I knew like, okay, this is like, I have to make some serious changes. Like, I really don't want to go down the road. Because that same day I was also about to pick up Oxycontin for the first time. And I just knew like this would be a good turning point. Like I can see this is going to get way worse, way fast, even though it's already been getting really bad, really fast the past few years. So I get arrested. I end up going to jail for 30 days. What was cool is I really started seeking God there. I mean, I was reaching out to my cellmate, sharing scripture. And it's funny, the only people that wrote me letters were disciples, wrote me letters all the time. I was getting all these letters from my friends at church, people at church, and people came to visit me. And I like will never forget that, because when I got out of jail, my friends in the world were like, hey, Ben's back. Let's go get some more marijuana. Let's go out partying, And so like, I was just at that point really unattracted to that. However, so at that point I got sober for about 6 months. I was going to AA. I was doing well. I wasn't using. And so I had this experiment. Okay, let me see if I could just have a beer socially. I'm not going to get drunk. I just want to have a beer. And so I do that. I have a beer. That leads to 6 beers. And I just go right back to drinking and driving, getting drunk every day, stealing Robitussin cough syrup from CVS. It just unleashed all of this. And that's when I really realized, I cannot drink socially. I don't view alcohol the same way other people do. I'm just different like that. I used to think there was something wrong with other people. Why do they just want one drink? That makes no sense to me. It still doesn't make sense to me sometimes. But then I realized, okay, well, I'm the one that's obviously abusing this. And so what was different for me is, I'll never forget it. I remember the last time I drank, and it was an emotional low. It wasn't like I'd gotten arrested again or anything. I got drunk, I was throwing up, and I remember just thinking to myself, I am so done with this life. I had like a breaking point, like I'm just done. I've hurt so many other people. I remember seeing my mom cry for the first time. And that was so painful for me. I'd never seen my mom cry. And she was just so hurt and sad by feeling like she had failed me. And I remember that was so painful to see my mom in that type of pain because of my alcoholism. And so I had just had enough. And I remember September 9th, September 3rd, 2009 was the last time I ever had a drink. And I said that day, I'm never drinking again. And I had said that in the past. Okay, I'm not going to drink, but I like knew I meant it then because I just had enough. And I went back to AA and I stayed there for a year and I got sober, but I was still smoking cigarettes and I was still living a worldly life. And then after a year in AA, I really thought, you know what, this like isn't enough for me. It's not enough to just be sober because I can feel like a dry drunk. Even though I'm sober, I can still behave the same way. I can still make decisions that like an addict would make. I don't have the same accountability. And that's when I realized like, I really need God. Like I'm depressed, I'm miserable, I'm not happy with my life. I'm tired of hurting people. And at that point, someone in the church asked me if I wanted to study the Bible. And I was like, yeah, I do want to study the Bible again. I really do. And at that point, I was just ready. I had lost all my friends. I had lost, 2 scholarships from being arrested. And I was like, I got nothing else. I have nothing. Like, give me God, I'll take it. I want this more than anything else right now. And it's funny, in recovery, they say, until the pain of using overcomes the pain of being sober, that's the point when you get out. Because oftentimes the pain of not using is too great. And so I was done with it. And I studied the Bible for probably like 5 months. And I got baptized 2010, June 27th. And I'm really grateful to God because I swear I never thought I could become a Christian. I remember thinking, wow, like guys in the church, I have so much respect for you. Like when I wasn't a Christian, I would think that, and they would meet up with me. And I think a lot of people in the church like kind of lost hope in me a bit. I remember later on people saying, wow, we didn't think you were going to make it. Even the guys in CR in New York were like, yeah, man, we didn't think we'd see you again. We thought you were a goner. And it just shows God's glory that he can really take the weakest of the weak and show his power through changing them. And he really can. And that's why I love working with people in recovery. And that's why I love working with reaching out to my artist friends, because it's the people that you don't expect to be open that, really have so much hope in God for sure. And so I have a big heart for this, and I'm really grateful for God saving me, and happy to share kind of my point of view on finding contentment with God and maybe some things that have helped me and how I view just alcohol in general, and not so much from so I guess not just from talking about alcohol from an alcoholism perspective, but just maybe more biblical and maybe more how to like manage and find boundaries within that. It's funny. So this past year, I feel like I've always had, the past 10 years, I feel like I've always been very consistent in my quiet times and feeling close to God, and for the most part, overall. But it's funny because this has been, I think, the year that I've wrestled the most with finding contentment with God. Out of all the 10 years, this has been like that year. And I'm like, man, it's just a weird year with that. I'm in kind of a funk and kind of in a rut. So when Tika asked me to talk about this, I just kind of laughed and was like, oh man, this is not a coincidence. This probably isn't a coincidence. And then also like, oh, this is really funny. Like now I have to like really study this. And I'm also like, I can be honest with you guys that like, I'm definitely just as much preaching to myself, and talking to myself, but I think it's really good. And, I've been praying about this every day for like a year. So it's just funny that this is the topic out of all the other topics, the one I feel most inadequate to speak on, but also grateful to study out and learn from as we go. So first, I want to share a bit about my perspective on contentment, and then I'll kind of wrap in how I view alcohol into the message. But, in Psalm 37, if you guys turn there, swipe or use the Google link or in a physical Bible, it's such a great chapter that I think is kind of about this theme of trusting God. And such a great chapter if you read the whole thing. But specifically, in verse 4, Psalm 37 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." And, I think it's funny. A lot of times I think people go to this verse because we like to hear like God gives us what we want, and we like affirmation that God cares about what we want. And, it's cool. I think like it's really cool to know that God cares about that. And it's great to know that he is concerned with that. And he does give us things that we want. And sometimes it takes a long time, but I think the most important part is really found in that first part where it says, delight in the Lord. And, I've just found for myself that when I'm more focused on how I can delight in the Lord and what that means, I'm much more satisfied than when I'm focused on what I want or what I'm not getting or what's an unfulfilled desire. When you're more intensely focused on that, you're more inclined to be disappointed or frustrated or unhappy with your circumstances and events. And, we all know contentment has nothing to do with circumstances. It's a perspective. And so I think really asking ourselves, how can we find delightment in the Lord? Is that what you're focused on? Is that, what you're excited about? Is delighting in the Lord for you a priority, something that you're aware of? I think are good questions to ask. And then, if you read the surrounding verses outside of verse 4, you'll notice that, so much of it is about, our trust in God, and especially verses 3-8. And trust not as something that's intangible or kind of theoretical, but trust really how it's shown through your commitment, and that God really knows what is best for us and what you need, because sometimes what we want isn't exactly what we need, or it's not the right time. So I think we want to have this heart that delights in God, worships God, the creator, and rather than the created or all these other things we can replace God with or play with. And sometimes we're not even aware of it, but God gives us great things, and sometimes we can take those good things and turn it into an idol, or turn it into something that we want to find fulfillment in, or be gratified by, or find comfort from. And it's from God, but we can put it in his place. And that's why it's a boundary and it's a fine line that I think we have to kind of think about and be aware of. And also avoiding this type of transactional relationship where it's like, God, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. I don't know if anyone's ever kind of wrestled with that in their heart. It's not usually something I feel like we say, okay, God, if you give me this, then I'll do this for you. But a lot of times in our hearts, kind of deep down, there can be like this very thin layer of like, okay, God, like, I want this to happen or that or this or that. And then I'll kind of do this stuff for you. And, I'll follow these scriptures, and then I'll really give you my whole heart. There can be these conditions that we play with that are very subtle and not always very clear to us, that, becomes a transaction with God rather than a trust, rather than delighting in God for who he is, for his goodness, because he loves you so much. But it's funny. So I really think that, everyone is in some kind of waiting or wanting. And I think God allows this a lot of times because he does so much work in the waiting room. And, it's not healthy in general to have us get everything we want when we want it. And, it's oftentimes not healthy to get what we think we might want. Sometimes what we want is harmful to us and we don't even realize it. And God's just protecting us from the thing we think we want, because God's this protective Father that loves us. And so we have to trust God with that he knows more than we know, because he wants to keep us safe and he wants to keep us close to him, and doesn't want to give us anything that's going to take us away from him. And he knows that we can handle more than we know sometimes. But God does so much work in the waiting room. And that's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot as I'm trying to grow personally, and just being patient and really waiting for God and being grateful for what I have, and trying to find delight with the circumstances and events in my life. And, I think everyone can do that. I don't think it matters if you're in a place of wanting something or not. Wherever you're at, you can choose to find delight in God, and you can choose to be content with what you have. And hopefully, God, you see how God is protecting you in certain ways, because if you have what you want, chances are you're probably going to want something else. And it's this cycle of getting, and there's always something new. And that's kind of what Ecclesiastes talks about. It's like the eyes never had enough seeing. It's like you go for a hike, you're probably going to want to go on another hike. You're not going to be like, okay, I've been on a hike, I'm good for the rest of my life. You don't listen to a song and go, okay, I'm good, I don't need to hear any more music. There's always this cycle. And if you get stuck in that cycle, it's really easy to lose contentment and lose gratitude for what you have and where you're at. And so, God really knows what's best for us, and I think works for the good of those who love him, as you guys know, and Romans says. So it's funny though. So with my story, I mentioned I went to New York. I got into the 3 schools that I applied to. My top school was in Boston, the Art Institute. And when I got on probation, the second time I got arrested, I couldn't live out of state. So I literally couldn't go to Boston or Micah in Maryland. The only option I had was go to New York. So I thought, okay, I can either go to New York so I can commute from Connecticut every day, or I don't go to school. And at first I was upset about it because I didn't want to go to New York. But then I realized a few years after that, wow, like New York was definitely the place for me spiritually, with the ministry, with my career, with the people I was able to reach out to. It's at like 100%, but it took me a few years to realize that. And then I find out the school I wanted to go to went under and wasn't doing well. And that was my top school that, so it's funny looking back and seeing, I'm really grateful I am grateful I got arrested, because it changed my life, but it also brought me to New York. And so God has a funny way of turning bad things into good in really mysterious ways. But that was an example of a time when, God really knew what was better for me and what I needed through those unfortunate circumstances. And, in Psalm 37, verse 7, I love this. It says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways." And there's this process of waiting, being content, being committed, and also not comparing yourself to others. I think, and I'll say as a side note, comparing yourself to others is the fastest and easiest way to be discontent and unhappy. It's just the fastest way to wrestle with it. And that's why you see with apps like Instagram, like our generation, it makes so much sense why there's so much more anxiety and depression. Can you believe that? Like devices and things that are supposed to connect people and be inspiring, which, they can be for sure. I don't think technology is bad. I think it's neutral. I think what people get from it and take from it and expose themselves to and their hearts to can be really unhealthy, and how much time you spend on it can be really unhealthy. And that's why there's anxiety and depression with this. And then everyone's comparing themselves to each other on social media, and everyone's unhappy with where they're at. Even people on vacation, they post pictures on vacation, and then they look at other people's pictures at other vacations. It's like there's this constant cycle of just not being happy with where you're at in the moment. There's a funny saying in AA, early on, where if you have one foot in yesterday and one foot in tomorrow, you're pissing all over today. And sorry if that's a bit graphic, but it's like, when you're so focused on this or that, you're like ruining being in the moment. You're not living for the time that that you have, because you don't know what tomorrow will bring. So I think those are things that help me to be in the moment, to trust God, to be at peace, and to really allow God to work in the moment, day to day. I want to read you guys a line from a song that I really like. And I thought about this song when I was coming up with this, because it's a song that has really inspired my faith in a lot of ways. And it's by a band called Beautiful Eulogy. They do rap and spoken word, and they play with really interesting sound design. But this song is great. It's called Worthy. And the whole album is called Worthy. And it's all about God's glory. And I'll read you the lyrics, because I love this song so much. And you can hear his heart through it. It says, "I am a created being. You created everything. You make footstools of fools and galaxies your rings. You are Christ the consummate, my hope and every confidence, worthy to receive praise from every mouth and every continent, infinitely worthy of loyalty in my allegiance, worthy enough to die to self and offer my obedience." I love this band so much, and especially this song and the lines, because to me, this is a heart that really delights in God, and that it's not an obligation to be obedient, but it's such a joy and such a privilege to know God. You can see so much gratitude in his heart. And if you listen to the song, you can hear and see all the respect that he has. I just love this band a lot. I would definitely encourage you to check them out. They're called Beautiful Eulogy. and they definitely advocate a lot for using art to glorify God. I'm going to put these lyrics in the chat so you guys can read them there. I do, on that note too, I do have a funny, I do remember very specifically when I was living with Tika in 2012, every morning when we would drive to share our faith on campus, every morning we would wake up and get in the car, and Tika would play the same rap song every day. And I just kept thinking, like, man, there's like, I haven't, like, can we do something else? It was just repeated every day. So Heather, I don't know if you have to deal with that anymore, or if it's a new song, but I had those songs ingrained in my mind for months. I knew every word. I would go to sleep with them. I'd wake up knowing it was coming. So I appreciate that, Tika. You should definitely check out this band though, because they're really good. So I do have a question I want everyone to write down, and it's not something you have to answer right now. I would say maybe think about it tomorrow, maybe find a scripture to go along with it. Spend some time to really think about this, because it could be different for every individual. But the question is, how do I delight in the Lord? And I think I just want everyone to think about for themselves tomorrow, like, how can I stay delighted in the Lord? How can I stay fulfilled? What is it for me? Is it being in nature? Is it listening to music? Is it really thinking about the prayers that God's answered in my life? Is it following a character in the Bible? Is it remembering his promises? What keeps you delighted in the Lord? Because I think that's good to consider and really actively think about. So we're not passive and just like, I hope God does something for me. It's like, any relationship is something that's proactive. And now, with COVID, I get it, like, I totally get it. This is a really tough year for a lot of people, and people are lonely, people are depressed, people are anxious, people are bored, and unemployed, and it's really tough. And I get why a lot of people in general just are looking to alcohol and so many other things. I mean, it really is a tough year, a really trying year. And so specifically when it comes to alcohol, one of the first things that I think about is really knowing what the trigger is, really identifying the trigger and how to address it. So this could, I guess, apply to any type of sin, not just alcohol. Today we're talking about alcohol, so I'll talk about that. But what's the trigger? Is it loneliness? Okay, how can we address that? Is it more people you have to call? Do you need a weekly prayer partner? Are you feeling, do you have people you can reach out to, friends? Is it depression? Maybe looking into getting counseling. Is it boredom? Maybe finding a project to work on. Is it all three of those things? Then do all three of those things. I think in general, a really good rule of thumb is to be proactive. I think I find that just that in any type of recovery setting, and just in general as a Christian, being proactive is going to really help you, rather than being just allowing things to happen. In recovery, a lot of times we talk about this acronym called HALT. I don't know if anyone's heard about it before, but it stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And these are all, and we talk about this weekly because these are all states that we're trying to learn how to cope with sober, because they're weakened states that oftentimes we would use drugs or drink to. If I'm lonely, drink can solve that. If I'm angry, hungry, or tired, those are all states that could really trigger wanting to drink. Or it could be any type of sin, but for alcohol, those are important triggers. And so we talk about those because we want to find a healthy coping mechanism when those things are happening. If it's lonely, if it's depression, if it's boredom, whatever it may be, tiredness, if it's when you're sleepy, have a plan for, and bring some guys or women in your life to talk about those things, so that, you can really attack it and then learn how to cope with that. So it's not just overwhelming you in the moment. And, now Tika mentioned love drinking. Alcohol is, there's nothing wrong with alcohol at all from my perspective. If you can handle it, it is something to enjoy. There's nothing, it's as simple as that from my point of view. But I think with the point of this conversation is, only and you have to ask yourself, how far is too far? How much is too much? And how often is too often? But then the more important underlying question I would say is, why are you drinking? Is it just for enjoyment? Is it, or is it trying to be in an altered state of mind? Are there feelings you're trying to numb and not confront? Are those things playing a role? Because that, I think, is going to end up being more important to really identify and think about when it comes to alcohol. I want to watch a quick trailer to the movie. It's 2 minutes long. Okay, this is a trailer to a film I watched pretty recently. It's a new film. And I'll watch the trailer. It's funny. The trailer is kind of like the whole movie combined in 2 minutes. It's just like a 2-minute cut down version of the movie. But yeah, I have a few thoughts about the trailer when it's done. I was saying you have to read it because there's subtitles. So everyone get your reading glasses on.
Jeg har lyst til at starte aftenen med lidt champagne. Det lyder dejligt.
Jeg er i bil. Jeg skal bare have en dansk vand uden citrus.
Uden citrus, ja tak.
Ja.
Hæft, det er godt det her.
Ja, det er sgu synd, du er så fornuftig.
Men spørgsmålet er, hvad der i virkeligheden er fornuftigt. Der findes en norsk filosof. Han mener, at mennesket er født med en halv promille for lidt.
Altså, jeg må sige, jeg kunne da godt sådan bruge en halv promille sådan på daglig basis for at få lidt mere selvtillid.
Det har vi da alle sammen brug for. Det har du da også brug for. Jeg synes, det er spændende.
Det gør jeg også. Så det er det, vi gør.
Er I fulde?
Nej, det er vi ikke.
Forklar dig for børnene, hvad som har hændt.
Jeg blev lidt fuld i morgen.
Jeg har hele tiden synes, det var fint, at I eksperimenterede alt muligt, men det her, det er
Jeg går ikke ud fra, at der er nogen her, der har et problem, jeg skal vide noget om.
Hey Ben, maybe you can send us a link. I can send an email because we weren't able to see the subtitles, but you can continue. That's fine.
Oh, dang. That's okay.
I think I got the gist of it though.
Well, yeah. So they there's these teachers. I mean, so Martin's the main character, and he from the beginning of the film is he's lost in his life. His marriage is like not doing well. He's not close to his kids. He's a teacher, and these 3 other teachers, like are interested in this Norwegian philosopher who says, if you keep your blood alcohol content level at like 0.05 throughout the entire day, you'll be more like effective or like energetic. And so they said, okay, let's try to do this and record how everything's going and journal it. And so they start, and things seem to be going really well. He's better at teaching. He's more excited to be there. Everyone seems to have more success. And you can see in the beginning, and they're like, oh, this is great. Let's up it up. And then it slowly, it just progresses and gets worse and worse. And one of the characters ends up dying in the end, and it just gets like really messy and bad. And I think that this is, definitely go back and see the subtitles. But this is, I think, how a lot of people perceive alcohol in some ways, in extremes, in a way where it's like, oh, I want alcohol to do this for me. But it's really easy to take it too far. And even if you don't take it too far, it's really unfulfilling as a whole when you put everything in it, right? Especially if it's not, God that you're putting everything into. I mean, alcohol is a depressant to begin with. So like people that are depressed going to alcohol to solve that, it's like the biggest mistake. Yet people do it all the time. And that's just, I think, how a lot of the world can think. Oh, so like even my teacher used to also say like even happy hour, the idea of happy hour is kind of funny like that, right? Like my teacher would always say, are people so miserable with their jobs that they have to go to happy hour after work? And not that there's anything wrong with happy hour, but I think people can have this perspective of like, oh, I want to like escape and be in a different environment, be in a different state of mind, and it's fun and great. But in reality, it really, it really can easily take a toll in your life if you're not, if you're not careful with it. Now, with that point, the last thing I'll say as I wrap up is I don't think the solution is trying to be happy all the time with whatever you think might make you happy. I mean, that's just not realistic. I don't think being content, you just can't be happy all the time. But, being content, I think in your walk with God means, I think it's a choice that you make, and happiness can come and go depending on circumstances or events. But contentment is really this overarching sense of satisfaction with your life, with your spiritual state, with God, so that even when bad things do happen, your world's not rocked. You're not, it's not the end of the world. You still are good because you have your core, you have your backbone. And so, as many people though are chasing to live in this happiness state, this kind of deceitful nature. And it's so fleeting, happiness and chasing. And that was me in high school. I was chasing happiness. I was chasing the drinks and the drugs and just such a quick fix when God, says, okay, if you wait a little while, you'll be good for eternity. Even if you suffer for a little bit on earth like this, you have a whole eternity to like be great. It's totally worth the payoff. But also God's like, well, yeah, you're going to suffer here on earth. He's very clear about that. You'll have troubles, but like you'll also have great times. And he's like, I'll give you more than you even thought. I can do immeasurably more than you ask or imagine. You have no idea. If you trust in me, put your confidence in me, be committed to me, I will give you the desires of your heart. Delight in me though. Like you see what I'm saying? Like God wants our hearts completely. So I just think like if we strive for that, if we root for that, like we'll be set and be able to help other people that are going to alcohol or going to drugs or going to other things, not realizing that there's this path of delighting in the Lord that's so much better and so far pays off. So thank you. I'll end it there. Thank you guys so much for listening to me. And thank you for listening to my story.